Welcome to 101. I'm Vincent Tolliver, your host, and today we are live from Hudson Grill in Midtown Atlanta. Today, our guest is the Executive Director of the National Football League Players Association, the NFLPA. When we come back, DeMaurice Smith. DeMaurice, thank you very much and welcome to 101.
My pleasure. Great to be in Atlanta. Great to be with you. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see you. When you graciously agreed to do this interview, we were at the NFL headquarters at a KSI event, and so I have been very excited. I'm glad you're here, and your appearance has been eagerly anticipated.
Well, I hope I don't disappoint.
Well, you won't disappoint. You never do. All right, well, let's get started. In 2010, you received the Alumnus of the Year award from your alma mater, Cedarville University. Cedarville is a small Christian school without a football team,
Correct.
with the exception of intramural football.
Correct.
Tell me, what was your experience like at Cedarville?
You know, I loved it. Cedarville is a small school in the middle of Ohio. A number of my teachers in my high school went to Cedarville.
Sure.
My father was very interested in making sure that I went to a school where I wasn't going to major in sports, so
Sure.
I'll leave it at that.
Yes.
I had a couple of opportunities to go play football in small schools, so we kind of cut a deal, and Cedarville was a Christian college, and I at least thought at that time that there was a chance I was going to go into the ministry. They gave me an opportunity to run track there, so it seemed like a perfect fit. I love Cedarville.
Yeah.
It was small, but for folks who have a strong faith, strong Christian faith, to learn and to be taught along with Christian values, to me it was a perfect place to go to school.
Yes.
And I had a wonderful opportunity, met great friends, and certainly loved to play there and love sports there.
Speaking of meeting great friends and even greater, when you were a student at the University of Virginia School of Law, you met your wife while you were in law school.
I did.
Did you know that you would marry her when you first met her?
Now you're just about to try to get me in as much trouble as possible. Yeah, this is a live show, right?
Right.
You know, I did. When I met my wife, I met my best friend.
Sure.
And that was something that was, you know, not only pretty cool given the way in which we met, but, you know, having an opportunity to meet someone who instantly became your best friend, and certainly to now look back almost 21 years in November, to think that the university brought us together is something pretty special.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And you guys have kids.
We do.
Yeah.
We do. There are times when I'm sure that they would not want me as a dad, and there are times when I look at them and I'm looking forward to them graduating and moving on before they drive me insane.
And they're active in sports.
Active in sports. I have the opportunity of coaching my daughter again this year in basketball for the 7th year in a row, and I love my girls' basketball team. I was able to coach my son in basketball, soccer, and baseball.
Yeah.
But he has now moved on to AAU basketball and travel lacrosse. So sports is a big part of our family. I believed in it certainly as a young person, but I also know that it taught me and teaches my kids a number of lessons that I think they learn at a much younger level.
Sure.
Than they would learn later on in life. And get an opportunity as a dad to not only have that parent relationship, but that coach relationship.
Yes.
Is pretty special.
Yeah. Your professional trajectory has been unprecedented. UVA School of Law, Department of Justice, Patton Boggs, NFLPA. Why the NFLPA?
You know, one, it was a great opportunity that really came out of the blue. To be perfectly honest with folks, with you, I was working with the campaign. I was on the transition team for the Department of Justice once then-elect Senator Obama had become the president-elect.
Yes.
So really my thinking was that if I was fortunate enough to go back into the Justice Department as a presidential appointee, that's really what I was looking forward to. And one day the phone rang, and it was a search committee that said that they were putting together a group of about 300 people
300.
To be evaluated for the job of the executive director, and asked whether I'd be interested.
And you said yes.
I said yes eventually. Again, I probably thought about it, prayed about it, talked to my wife about it for about a week. And really we sat down, and really the only question was whether or not we believed that there was something of value that we thought that I could bring, and that a group of people that I've been lucky enough to work with could bring to the players of the National Football League. And when we made the decision that we thought we could look at things a different way, maybe apply a couple of different strategies, but certainly get our players ready for the fight that was going to come from the owners in a couple of years, we really thought that we were the best people to lead the players through the fight.
When you were at the Department of Justice, you worked for Eric Holder, who was the Deputy Attorney General at the time.
Deputy Attorney General at the time, and then I also worked with him when he was my U.S. Attorney when I was a line prosecutor at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the District of Columbia.
And how long were you a prosecutor?
10 years.
Oh, wow, 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 wow.
And that was, truly one of the best jobs you could ever have.
Yeah.
I was in the violent crime section, in the homicide section for 5 years. Eric became our U.S. Attorney later on in my stint there, and then when he became Deputy Attorney General, he asked me to go with him.
Nice. At Patton Boggs, you were a litigation partner.
Yep.
What was that experience like?
Tremendous. I love trying cases. My dad certainly wanted me to go into the ministry like all of my uncles and like my grandfather. I wasn't called in that direction, so in some little way, me standing up in a courtroom was about as close to a pulpit that I think I was going to get. I loved trying cases, loved the practice of law.
Mm-hmm.
I loved having the opportunity to work for the Fortune 500 companies all over the world, but also it was a great opportunity to really have the time and the resources to hone your craft, and being able to play your game at the highest legal level was something that was very, very cool.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Patton Boggs has a lot of good people, including a former Secretary of Transportation, and Rodney Slater, who is from Arkansas.
And one of truly the best people you'll ever meet
Yes.
in your life.
Yes.
Rodney was a mentor to me, remains a mentor to me, but not only a great lawyer and a great public servant, but a great African-American man who believes that as you go forward, you have an obligation to reach back and put your arm back and carry folks forward with you. And to be at a firm with people like Rodney and others was an experience of a lifetime.
Good. On March 15, 2009, by a unanimous vote from the Board of Players, you were elected the Executive Director of the NFLPA. Now, the presumptive successor was Troy Vincent of Gene Upshaw. You beat him out handedly. How?
I think the players made a decision of not only who they wanted, but the type of leader they wanted. When I talked to the players in March of 2009, I told them point blank that, two things. One, the person that you will select has to be more about the plan that he has, the dedication that he has, the vision that he has, more than who the person is. And two, if they were looking to hire a leader who was going to do all the work himself and push that rock up the mountain by themselves, then they should certainly elect Troy Vincent or somebody else, because I wasn't going to be that kind of guy.
Sure.
The fight that the owners had already decided that they were going to bring to us was going to be a fight for our true existence. The owners made a decision that they were going to crush the union in the same way that their lawyers had crushed the hockey union. So the decision of the players was really one about whether or not you were going to rise to the level as men, whether you were going to take on this fight as one that was going to be about your true existence. And if you wanted to fight, if you wanted to do it at the highest level, then I was going to be an honor to be the guy that led them through it. And they made a decision to pick me, and Troy went on to do other things and work at the National Football League.
Yes.
And our mission is fundamentally different than his. I represent the players.
Right. I read when you had your first address, a whole 2 minutes of the NFL owners, there were several comments afterwards. Now, I want to verify with you if this is true or not. I read that you went into the room, you looked above the owners' heads. After your 2 minutes address, you walked out of the room, you didn't stop, you didn't shake any hands. Is that true?
Well, you know, I'm sure the owners who gave that account would love for it to all be true.
Yes.
Sometimes I think they only have a passing familiarity with truth. The reality of it was I was asked to go in and meet the owners. You know, from the time that I stood up for the first time as a young prosecutor, somebody told me that you had an obligation to look every juror in the eye.
Sure.
I've tried the toughest cases in D.C., including 2 people that put contracts on my life. I don't have any problem looking anybody in the eye, and my guess is that there wasn't an owner in the room that I'm afraid of. So I made it a point to look at every owner and every person in that room, man to man, eye to eye. When it was time to leave, I left because I had a job to do.
Right.
When it's time for us to get together and break bread and shake hands, that's what we do. But they had made a decision to bring a fight to us, and we sure as heck were going to bring a fight to them.
One of the owners was quoted as saying, and I don't know if you've heard this quote, when he was asked about your appearance at this particular meeting, he said, and I quote, "Frankly, he was damn rude," end quote. So that's very interesting, because I have also read that your comments have been seen to be inflammatory. Do you think your comments are inflammatory?
You don't know. You know, look, and again, you know, the owner who made those comments apparently didn't have the guts to identify himself. So where I come from, if he's got something to say, he knows my address, probably knows my telephone number.
Sure.
And the day that he wants to talk about it inside, and as we say from DC, we're willing to talk about it outside too.
Of course.
So my feeling about my job is to be brutally honest with our players. And the simple fact of it was this. At a time that the owners made a decision to lock our players out, revenue in the National Football League was about $9 billion. The players up until that point took about less than half of all of that revenue. And the owners made a decision not only to lock our players out, but to cut off their insurance. For our players who were expecting children, they lost their insurance. They made a decision to ask all of our players to give back 20% of all of their salaries. They wanted our players to play 2 more games in an already bruising schedule, and they wanted our players to give up their pensions.
Wow.
Well, where I come from, not one of those owners said please when they made the decision to try to step on our necks and take money out of our pockets and health insurance away from our players' children.
Sure.
So when I tell our players that it's time to man up, to accept the fight that's coming, if the owners ever thought that that was inflammatory, I'm not going to apologize.
Yeah.
When I told that our players that we were preparing for a war, it was true. And for that, there's no apology. But each and every day when I go to former players meetings, I see guys in their 40s and their 50s who can barely walk. I know that right now we have thousands of workers' comp cases that the National Football League fights us on.
Why? Why would they? I mean, and I've read that there are over 3,000 workers' comp cases that are presently being fought by the league.
Correct.
Why?
Well, when you add the fact that under the collective bargaining agreement, what the players do is actually we pay the owners for any out-of-pocket costs that would come to the teams as a result of a workers' comp claim. So your question of why they fight our workers' comp claim is made even more egregious by the fact that no team suffers any out-of-pocket cost for workers' comp claims. So you ask yourself, why does a team fight a player for compensation for the injuries that the player incurs at work?
At work.
The only 2 explanations I can come up with, greed and control. And I've come to the conclusion that one of the main reasons, or the only reason left for our teams to fight us over those things, is they want to continue to exert the control that they think they have over players. So, in fact, during the collective bargaining process, we decided to offer to the owners to address anything that they may think may cause them loss of cost. We offered to give the owners, why don't we do this? Why don't we just predict what the actual cost, if there is any, that a team might lose in workers' comp.
Sure.
And under the CBA, we'll compensate you for those costs. Fact is, the owners rejected that proposal.
Wow.
So there's a lot in football that I certainly love. I love the fact that our guys give everything they have on the football field. What we continue to fight is a refusal by some of the owners to understand and compensate our players for the injuries that they incur at work.
Yeah, makes no sense.
It's repulsive.
It is repulsive. I agree. You negotiated successfully the CBA, and as it stands now, the CBA is, I believe, a 10-year agreement.
10-year agreement.
Are you pleased with it?
I am. The CBA did something, this CBA did something that all of the other collective bargaining agreements and the extensions have never done. I mean, for example, we reached back to our former players and created nearly $1 billion in new benefits, $700 million in pension benefits alone. And as a union leader, I'm extremely proud that very few unions get an opportunity to reach back to former employees and actually make their pensions better. We were able to do that in the National Football League to the tune of about $1 billion. And not only did we do that, we were able to decrease the number of padded practices in half.
Yes.
So in football, in professional football, there's no more two-a-days. We cut the amount of padded practices during the year to no more than 15. So there can only be one padded practice a week for the first 12 weeks. There can only be 4 padded practices for the remainder of the season.
And you also did something that I thought was key. You stipulated that, and I believe this is during, I don't know if it's during organized training or exactly when, but there could be no ball.
Absolutely.
At the practice.
And one of the reasons we did that was we wanted to create 2 things for our players. One, under the old CBA, most of our players got done playing football in December, unless you went on to the playoffs or went on to the Super Bowl. But most of our players then came back to work as early as mid-March. We wanted to make sure that our players had a true offseason.
Sure.
So now, for the length of time, that offseason extends now into late April, early May. And most importantly, even when they come back for off-season conditioning, it's just conditioning. There's no ball. You can't touch a ball.
Right.
So our players can work out. They can get stronger. But what we also figured out was, even when we gave players an off-season, coaches did something that every coach generally does. They cheat. So we wanted to have a hard and fast rule that no player can run drills, no pass drills, no one-on-one drills, no running back drills. We call it a flat ball. And during that flat ball period of time, our players can condition, but no coach can make them come back and run drills when our players truly want time off to heal.
Excellent, excellent. You successfully negotiated with the NFL commissioner, the CBA. And as a reward, you got a big bonus.
I did.
And just for the record, it is a matter of public record. So the bonus was $1 million.
It was.
What did you do with the money?
It's all in the bank.
Love it. I love it. Absolutely love it. Well, I think that the fans obviously were pleased. I was pleased when the lockout was over and when the agreement, the CBA agreement was made. And I think that, you know, the vision, as you speak to vision and leadership, was there. Yep. Both on the player side and then on the owner side.
And far more on the player side. I mean, look, it's a great job when you are around, you know, guys who are tremendous athletes. But what mattered for me back then is what I told a group of young people today when I was lucky enough to get this award. The true measure of a leader is not the points that you score, not the passes that you catch, not the yards that you run. The real measure of a leader and an athlete is the extent to which you bring yourself and your teammates to the highest level that you can play.
Absolutely.
And for our young men, answering the bell from these owners, from the richest people in the world, Drew Brees is a great quarterback, but I'll tell you what, he's a tremendous leader. And whether it was Steven Jackson or guys here named Matt Ryan or Eric Coleman, who used to be here, Tyson Clabo, Tony Gonzalez, all of those people who are already great players, every one of those men stepped up to the plate to represent their union in this fight. And for that, while I love the fact that they're tremendous athletes, everybody in the National Football League and every fan found out what our men were made of. And for that, I'll truly be grateful and always proud.
I'm going to read you a quote. Cartels do what cartels will do when left unchecked. The facts justify the complaint. Those were your comments after the NFLPA filed a lawsuit in the U.S. District Court of Minnesota alleging collusion.
Correct.
Where is that lawsuit presently? What is the state of that lawsuit?
The papers were filed. Lawyers from both sides argued in front of Judge Doty in the District Court of Minnesota a few weeks ago. Supplemental papers were recently filed by both sides, as well as affidavits. And it is pending before the judge right now on any outstanding motions. We'll see how the judge rules. But at the end of the day, hey, look, I come from a world where, as a former prosecutor, we were bound by rules. When the National Football League made a decision in the uncapped year to collude and basically agree to have a secret salary cap, that violated the old CBA. And when I said that cartels do what cartels will do when they are left unchecked, that is speaking from the perspective of a businessman, and certainly speaking in the perspective of a former prosecutor.
The Redskins, and I believe it was the Dallas Cowboys, sort of sounded that alarm, I believe. Because
yes, they did.
Okay, yeah.
Well,
because the suit was filed right after that.
Well, you had two teams in the Cowboys and the Redskins who were punished by the league for violating a secret salary cap. Well, when the Redskins and the Cowboys decided to bring an action against the National Football League for collusive activity, it became abundantly clear to us that there was collusive activity. Yeah. And that's why we filed our lawsuit.
In 2006, I believe, Roger Goodell established the Player Advisory Council, which is now being Dissolved. Thank you. Some of the player reps criticized the dissolvement and criticized you. What's your position on that?
Well, some players criticized it. The Players Executive Committee and all 100 of our player reps were in favor of dissolving it. And here's why. I'm sure that Roger enjoyed having a hand-picked group of players that he could run certain things by and have those players say yes. But the way that the collective bargaining agreement is structured and the way that our union is run is that we have a 11-member executive committee that is voted by the players.
Yes.
We have 100 player reps that are represented by the players. Those are our leadership, and that's how decisions are made. And I know that the owners and perhaps the commissioner enjoyed an opportunity to try and end run around that authority. But until our players lay down and decide to stop being leaders, we will force the national football player to go through the leadership that these players elect.
And as they should be forced to. Forbes magazine came out with an interesting article, and it posed a question. I don't know if you saw the piece. It asked the question, is DeMaurice Smith the most important man in football?
No.
No.
No, not even close. And if you have to ask anybody, please ask my kids.
Okay.
You know, the most important men in football, the most important people in football are the players who have the skill and the dedication to play this game. If Roger Goodell has the best day on the planet, guess what? You still need players.
Yes.
If D. Smith has the best or worst day on the planet, guess what? You still need the players.
Yes.
And for all of the people who have played this game and for all the people who will play this game, my job and our leadership's job is to make sure that the focus of this business remains on the people who make it go.
30 for 30 broke. Raised a lot of discussion in the sports community. Stephen A. Smith said he couldn't watch it after 3 minutes. Skip Bayless made a comment about rookies falling asleep at the rookies symposium. I don't know if you heard that comment. What do you say to that?
The way we approach educating our players about their obligations, I make it as simple as possible. I expect our young men to be good husbands, good brothers, good sons, good members of their community. That also means that they have to take upon themselves the particular responsibility of managing their money. So what we do as a union, we have a financial advisors program where we want to make sure that the people that are advising them have the players' best interest in mind. But here's the reality. No financial advisor, no person who manages money is going to be able to do a great job unless that player takes upon himself the responsibility of knowing that he is responsible for himself and for his family.
You can lead a horse to water, but you certainly can't make him drink.
And look, during the lockout and preparing for the lockout, there was no individual person on the planet who wanted our players to save their money more than me. Because if our players were prepared to be locked out by the owners, if they were prepared to provide for their families when the owners stopped paying them money, that made sure that we were going to be a strong group of men negotiating with the National Football League. So what did we do? We created a lockout fund for them. We told our players that every year leading up to the lockout, they had to save a third of their paycheck. At the same time, did we buy a secret insurance policy that would enable our players to be paid for a year when the owners locked us out? Yes, we did. But all of that comes back to the way in which we impress upon them the need for financial responsibility. Mm-hmm. The show broke. I saw it. There's some things in there that are true. There's some things in there that are not true. But that shouldn't be the focus of the discussion. The focus on the discussion, as I tell everybody in our locker rooms, is there is a perception that we are not handling our business as young men. And for every player in the National Football League who is given this opportunity to not only play a great game, but to earn a living that should spring them forward into the next portion of their lives, I know that when we took a survey, only 10% of our players were thinking about the future. We've committed our union and we've committed our player leadership to be measured by several things over the next coming years. One, to increase the number of college graduates who are coming into professional football. Second thing, to make sure that there is a transition, a successful transition of those young men, not after football is over, but while they're playing football. And third, to make sure that they can provide for them and their families after football is over.
There was a particularly disturbing moment of broke when the former player Keith McCants talked about 29 surgeries I think he had while he was, I don't know if he had them all while he was in the league, but over the course of years, 29 surgeries, his drug addiction, etc. Where I know that there is a department at the NFLPA that takes care of former players or dedicated to former players. What were your thoughts when you heard McCant's story, and did you know before you heard it the circumstances?
Look, you know, as given my job and the way in which I travel around the country and talk to former players, there are hundreds of Keith McCants.
Yes.
You know, Luther Ellis, for example, a former Detroit Lion, came and spoke to our rookie business of football last year and talked about how, as a pro player, he allowed himself to go broke at a time when he knew that he had an obligation to provide for his family. We bring in guys like Herm Edwards to talk about the importance of personal responsibility.
Herm is a great guy.
One of the best men you will ever meet.
Yes.
But what we have decided to do over the past year is not only just talk to our players. Yes, the league has the rookie symposium, and I think at times they deliver a good message. But I know from being there that putting hundreds of young men in seats for 3 days for 6-7 hours a day is probably not the best way to connect with young men about what their needs are. So as a union, we've made the decision that we're going to try to do things differently.
Sure.
We reorganized our office so that the old way was we had people in the office who were dedicated to former players, current players, and future players. I eliminated those distinctions in our office. Why? Because we want to be able to touch our players from the time before they come into the National Football League and to continue to touch them all the way through their careers into a world where we know they're going to be former players. So the way our office will operate in the future is you as a young man who is about to come into the National Football League, we want to touch you when you're a junior.
Sure.
We want to start talking to you about what's going to be expected of you as a pro player when you are a junior in college. And the same person who touches you as a junior is going to be the same person who welcomes you into the National Football League. It's going to be the same person who talks to you when you're a third-year player. It's going to be the same person who is hopefully encouraging you to get your degree before you leave football. And it will be the same person who transitions you into a new career after football.
That makes a lot of sense.
Well, and here's why. Over the last few years, both the National Football League and the NFL players, we've tried a myriad of things to aid players to get through and to transition into a better life. And over the last few years, while a number of people have done extremely well,
yes,
we know that there have been stories and instances where people haven't. So we wanted to try something new. And this idea of touching players all the way through is something that we have decided we are going to do. But at the same time, we will challenge the National Football League on things that we know hurt our men. And while the league office can bang the drum as much as they want about how much they care about our players getting college degrees, the National Football League still makes a decision to have an NFL combine that occurs during the middle of our players' senior year in their last year in school.
Right.
So what they do is authorize a job interview, the exclusive job interview, for our players to go through, so that as a result, most of our young men drop out of school right after their last football game in order to get ready for the league's audition that occurs at a time that they should be in school. Now, I'm not a fan of the combine.
Right.
I'm not a fan of the combine because it establishes a barrier to entry that most players need to go through at a time when they should be in school. So to me, if the league wants to step up and somehow match just a little bit of action to the rhetoric that they speak, let's come up with a better way of knowing exactly how fast our men can run and whether they can catch a ball or how high they jump at a time when they're already in school, and incentivize a program where we actually make it beneficial to our players to stay in school during their last year. The day that the National Football League makes that commitment to our young men is the day that I'll maybe back off some of the inflammatory comments. But you know what? Actually, I won't.
Yeah. I read that you have taught trial advocacy, and I just had a quick question about, do you still do it?
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
Well, I'm a teacher at heart. Yeah. I come from a long line of Baptist preachers, and like I said, my grandfather preached into his 90s. He passed away a week before he was supposed to marry my wife and I. So there's a little bit of that in my blood. I think it's important to have an opportunity to create opportunities to teach our young folks. I'm excited and always excited about trying cases, so I always go back to either teach labor law or...
when you say go back to UVA?
Go back to UVA, go to Georgetown, speak at George Washington University.
Yeah.
I usually give talks at New York University as well. So, I believe in always going back, and there's still a big part of me that's a trial lawyer at heart.
Sure.
So I'll be keynoting the American College of Trial Lawyers next week in New York.
Nice.
I dig it.
Yep.
I dig it.
In a recent interview, you said that there is a critical issue on the horizon that is perhaps even bigger than concussions. Chronic pain.
Yes.
Explain.
Well, you know, on our teams, you can put 60 guys in a room and ask them to raise their hands about concussions, and you're going to get a number. If you ask the same group of people whether folks in this room suffer from chronic pain, I guarantee you that all but a couple of players will raise their hand. And what we now know from both the literature and especially what we've learned from academia in the last really 5 years, chronic pain is its own individual identifiable ailment and injury. And from what I have read and what I now know, having not only talked to our players but surveyed our players, it is that instance of chronic pain that while a particular injury might heal itself, and while a concussion a player might recover, the issue of chronic pain is something that our players carry with them long after football is over. And when it comes to the ailments that then flow from that diagnosis of chronic pain, we know that it's things about the early onset of depression. We know that it becomes the ailment that becomes absolutely debilitating, that it then leads players to medicate, whether it be the overuse of alcohol or the overuse of pain medication. So all of those things are things that we now are fearing that are going to not only affect a larger group of our young men as we go forward, but we believe that the ailments that will come out of that are and could be on an exponential level much higher than a concussion.
Yeah.
So to me, what we have to do from the standpoint of players and the standpoint of management is to recognize, maybe for the first time officially, that the manner in which we are playing the games, even now, expose our players to something that could be incredibly debilitating later on in life.
You know, there's so many issues, and you've gone on record to saying that, you know, in the CBA, you don't look at any issue through a single lens. It's no issue. No one issue stops at the issue itself.
Correct.
There's always a broader picture. So it seems that there is a lot to deal with. But
little bit.
That's what you signed up to do. Now, there was about a couple of days ago, maybe 3 or 4 days ago, there was an article that came out that said the NFL, you have a problem. Did you read that article?
I did.
You did read it. What did you think? And I like the way they used the metaphor. They said that the NFL was indeed a drunk and intoxicated on its own popularity.
Well, I think that sometimes, especially in this country, some of our greatest challenges sometimes flow from the hubris and the belief that because we are where we are today, we are always going to be here. When I know and you know that as we look back at our own personal history, or certainly the history of the civil rights struggles, or the history of women's suffrage, history for workplace conditions, we got to this place in our country because we were always hungry about making things better tomorrow than they are today. I believe that as we look at where we are in the National Football League, we cannot afford to believe that because we are a very popular sport that generates a tremendous amount of revenue, that just because people will come see our games and just because we will always have players who play, that somehow we don't have an obligation to make this better for our players, better for our fans tomorrow than it is today. And reading that article, it was written in just a way where it questioned whether or not the owners could afford to lock out the referees when we know that they are people on the field who make the game safer.
That's right. In the article called for an intervention.
One is needed.
One is needed. Gene Upshaw led the NFLPA 25 years before his untimely death due to pancreatic cancer. Do you want or expect the same type of tenure?
Gene, I'm not as strong as Gene. Gene was one of those players, one of those men that I think you only see once in a lifetime. I serve at the pleasure of the players. The way that I approach my leadership with them is to explain to them that here are the things that I think that we need to accomplish as a group of men, as a group of family men, and as a group of players in the National Football League. When we accomplish those things, there are another group of things that we need to accomplish. So I never look at my career or my longevity against Gene's. I'm not sure there are many people on the planet who had the tenacity, the fortitude, the intelligence, and the will to lead the way that Gene did. The way that I look at our battles right now, I know that we need to do a better job in the Challenge of National Football League on making our game safer. I know that we need to fight to make the league more accountable to the injuries that our guys suffer at work. So until we reach those things, my job is to never be satisfied about where we are, to challenge our player leadership, to fight harder tomorrow, and it's a pleasure to lead them as long as they want me.
Do you like your job?
I love it.
Good.
I love it.
I appreciate your time.
Man, my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for watching. This has been 101. I'm your host, Vincent Tolliver, and for everyone here at 101, cheers.